Good news today about energy. There's an oil boom right here in the U.S. The International Energy Agency says a supply shock created by a surge in North American oil production will meet rising demand for energy over the next 5 years. Because of all that, domestic oil, the agency also predicts that OPEC will not have to increase output in the next 5 years. Meanwhile, crude oil fell by almost $1 today, closing at $94 and change.
Our next guest says that energy report is promising. He's John Felmy, chief economist at the American Petroleum Institute. Mr. Felmy, welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Do you see, as the IEA sees, a United States that will be energy independent by 2030 and maybe the largest producer of oil, even greater than Saudi Arabia, much sooner than that?
There's no question it can. Between what we can produce in this country, between imports from Canada and biofuels, we can become energy self-sufficient from a North American basis. And that means a lot in terms of energy security, jobs, and revenue for the government.
You know, our viewers might be wondering that if things are so good on the energy front, why aren't we seeing gasoline prices coming down? What's going on there?
Well, it's still a tight world market. While the IEA did reduce their demand growth, it still is growing and it's hitting record levels. And while the U.S. increased its production the most ever, we still haven't seen a lot of additional production worldwide. And so as long as demand continues to grow more than supply, you have a tight market.
Prices are lower at the pump than they were this time a year ago. They are higher, however, than they were just a few weeks ago. Why are prices rising a little bit when the price of crude, as we just said, is actually coming down a little bit?
Well, it has come down in the past couple of days, but prior to that, the price of crude went up about 20 cents a gallon. Ethanol prices went up about 30 cents a gallon, and we moved into the summer gasoline variety that is more expensive to produce.
Tell us a little bit more about supplies getting to the end users. So we're producing a lot more. Do we have the infrastructure, the pipelines, and other necessities to get the oil to where it has to go?
Well, if we're going to expand production by the amount that I just talked about, you're going to need more infrastructure. But you're also going to need more policy that helps in terms of access policy, tax policy, and regulatory policy. So it's going to be a combination of all those three things.
Can we produce, obviously the production of oil from offshore sources, such things as the Keystone Pipeline and the fracking, are very contentious issues in this country among those who favor the production. They say it's a jobs issue, and those, on the other hand, who say there are major environmental risks here. How can we hit the balance right, get the jobs we need, get the natural resources we need, and protect the environment?
Well, the most important thing we can do is educate folks on what the reality of energy is versus the rhetoric. We've had an enormous amount of misinformation campaign against hydraulic fracturing. We've had opposition to the Keystone Pipeline that doesn't make any sense in terms of economics and environment. And so we've got to educate folks on the reality versus rhetoric.
John, let me just go back to that point that Tyler brought up at the very beginning of our conversation, that the U.S. will become more powerful in the world in terms of oil production, producing more oil than Saudi Arabia. What does this do to who's going to be calling the shots from here on? And OPEC, for so many decades, has been dictating the price of oil. Now what happens?
Well, there's no question, all other things equal, increasing supply helps consumers. And of course, when you have a cartel that is composed of 40% of the world oil market, they have a lot of power. If that amount declines significantly, they've got less ability to influence prices. And
therein is the change in geopolitics that we referenced at the top of the show. John Felmy, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
John is the chief economist at the API.